Welcome to the Backyard Professor Responds videos. Things have been brewing for this last couple of years, and they have come to a head, as far as I'm concerned, on the Book of Abraham, and I am ready to completely revisit this issue with some very deep dives. Two new items that have come to my attention that I am excited to share with you. Let's get this Respawns video on the road, and I'll be right back. So, two new items. What I want to do is introduce a new series on the Book of Abraham, which I am going to begin with this introduction. Two new items have come to my attention, and I do thank those who are helping me acquire these items. And so I will acknowledge you openly and upfront, saying thank you so much. Rebecca Biblioteca from Mormonish, thank you for the email with one of those sources. We are witnessing a new situation going on here, and I'm going to briefly introduce this. This is a new series produced by the church, published through Deseret Book. Let's talk about. This is the only one I bought because they are $12.99, and they're really kind of a tiny booklet, sort of big pamphlet thing. This one's by Carrie Mulstein, one of the LDS scholars and Egyptologists. What I have noticed is in Deseret Book, they have this series, Let's Talk About, on all of the subjects that the church gospel topics essays have covered. The polygamy, the Book of Mormon and DNA, the Book of Mormon translation issues, the Book of Abraham, intellect and faith, blacks and the priesthood, every subject that the church produced essays on a few years back, in which they ridiculously hid it on their own official website behind several links, because they did not want to roll out the red carpet, and they did not want to share these very badly, but they have been forced to. And both Rebecca Biblioteca and Landon from Mormonish are going to join me. We are going to begin a new series on investigating deep dives into each and every one of those LDS gospel topics essays, beginning this coming up Sunday. You're not going to want to miss this. What I want to do is kind of share real briefly, just to introduce this series on the Book of Abraham that I'm going to upgrade, not only with all of my information knowledge, but the LDS Apologetics are not letting it go. And they've lost the war, they just don't know it. And for the sake of those who are continually looking, now we have, and welcome to the new subscribers to my channel and to the Mormon Discussion Inc. umbrella site. We're getting a lot of new subscribers. If you would, please subscribe and like to this series as well, The Backyard Professor, as well as all of the other ones. Check around, see what you like. We've got a variety of ways of dealing with the Mormon topics. I am a former Mormon apologist who recognized after a decade or so that I could not defend the indefensible. And so I am sharing the new light and knowledge that new people are beginning to look at and look into because of their looking and Googling on the internet, and they might have family or friends who are trying to keep them in the church through guiltifying them or shaming them, etc., or else they're just curious to know about the book of Abraham. I will state it up front immediately. I consider the book of Abraham the smoking gun against Joseph Smith. Truly, because unlike the gold plates which the angel Moroni took back, we do have the original source of Joseph Smith's translation of the papyri to give us the book of Abraham. I will go through the various apologetics. I just briefly want to introduce this one. I'm going to do a deep dive in this one too. The first 50 pages of this, he's priming us. He's priming us to accept no matter what that Joseph Smith was inspired, and you too can have faith in the book of Abraham, even though there are questions and issues. So the first 50 pages are going to be real easy to look at. The second half of the book is his various Egyptological evidence concerning the papyri, the relationship of the papyri with the book of Abraham, the translation characteristics, the Egyptian alphabet and grammar, how it's related to the book of Abraham, etc. One thing I've noticed about Kerry Mulstein, these are expansions of the gospel topic essays. And I think one of the worst things the church could have done is give those gospel topic essays. And Rebecca and Landon and I will be going deeply into those as a weekly series through every single one of the essays. These are an expansion. I suspect they've been getting more and more critiques, more and more questions. The essays are a debacle to the church, and so they're trying to expand them in their attempt to be more open with the controversial aspects of their history because they've been forced to it. There's no question about that. We will show that. What I find disingenuous about Kerry Mulstein's effort, and then I will move on to the big subject that I want to talk about tonight for just a few minutes. This is just going to be an introductory video. In this, and this is one of the apologetic attempts to try to reassure the faithful that what they're finding on the internet does not necessarily damage testimony, which I say malarkey without question. No weapon shall prosper. New light on sensitive issues, edited by Robert Millett. Kerry Mulstein has a chapter in this. Now, this text was published, I do believe, let me look real quick, I believe it was in 2011. Yes, 2011, BYU. From 2011 to his new publication here of 2022, so that's 11 years. During that 11-year gap, what Mulstein did for the evidences of the book of Abraham that he says give us hope that it is a true translation and that Joseph Smith is a true prophet and that there is a prophet on earth today, etc. I mean, he's spinning the old yarn that the church, of course, pays him to spin as a BYU scholar. In that 11-year gap, Mulstein simply hijacked his 11-year-old material evidences, so-called evidences, and he stuck it into this one. There's very little updating, and I think that's just cowardly. He doesn't mention at all the absolute fundamental watershed moment of Robert Rittner with his magnificent book. I don't know if I have it here accessible. I sure do, and I'm going to show you. I've shown you this book several times, but we will be dealing more with it on the Joseph Smith papyri. Molstein doesn't analyze this at all. But then the good news is neither do any of the apologists. Now what they're doing, now that we on the YouTube and the internet have been criticizing the apologists for the last several years, that you cannot ignore this material. Rittner was John Gee's teacher. What they're doing now is they're just quoting just a small part of Rittner just to get his name and that book in their footnotes to give you the impression that they are really heavy into this and that the Mormon scholars have outdone the Egyptologists who come to negative conclusions. Nothing can be further from the truth. That is a completely misleading, false image that the apologists are desperate to create. Now, the second thing, and basically, I will completely dismantle Kerry Molstein in this series. I guarantee it. The second thing I want to do, now I'm going to, I think what I want to do, this is recording, so I believe I can stay on this one. Hopefully this will continue showing me while I tell you about this. The BYU Studies, the brand new BYU Studies Quarterly, has just come up with a series with an entire, this is 61.4, with an entire 300-page edition of pure Book of Abraham updates, scholarly articles, and analysis. And in the introduction, they are describing their idea of the way that the Book of Abraham presents new light and information. And I can already tell by the way they're wording this that they're not going to engage in the online materials that have been analyzing not only the papyri, not only the relationship with the Book of Abraham with the papyri, not only the facsimiles, etc., but also with the actual text of the Book of Abraham. The apologists are accusing others of not paying attention to the text. That is just not true in any manner. And I will also pay attention to the actual text, the storyline of the Book of Abraham. You don't have to go any further than chapter 1, verse 1 to show that the Book of Abraham is Joseph Smith's production. It's not a translation of an ancient Book of Abraham at all. And I will get into that kind of detail. They're saying that it's an inspired or revealed translation of the writings of the biblical patriarch Abraham. They're pushing toward the catalyst theory, and it is fatally flawed, and I will share that in great detail with you as this series moves through its workings. And he acquired the papyri in 1837, so on and so forth. Now they're paying tribute to, they're trying to describe what they're doing here. They pay attention to the past scholarship of the Book of Abraham. They need to refurbish Hugh Nibley, which is what they love to do because they think he has the best model, the best method of approaching this Book of Abraham issue. I will demonstrate why that is not true. And then they do, and of course they say, well, the problem is the scholarship on the Book of Abraham spans through the decades. And of course it sometimes gets very technical. And so it daunts us. And so you can basically be reassured that these 4 scholars and editors of this particular edition, who are Stephen O. Smoot, John Gee, Kerry Molstein, and John S. Thompson, we have the PhDs, we have the credentials. Just pay attention to what we're saying here in this issue, and we've got it all covered. And I'm looking very forward to responding to this issue. I'm going to be very curious to see what kind of an updating. I'm going to be curious about who they use and who they do not use. And I'm also going to be curious if they want to present an image of completeness, of vast scholarly sources supporting the Book of Abraham. Look, we have 187 footnotes at the end of this article because they love the idea of quantity over quality. It wouldn't matter if you had 790 footnotes at the end of a 15, 20-page article if your method is flawed and if you don't use the evidence in context. And that means intertextual context between your parallels. I just had a wonderful hour-long discussion phone call talk with Brian Howwood this morning. And he was telling me that the reason I basically ended up seeing the entire relationship of the Book of Abraham and the Joseph Smith Papyri differently than John Gee and Kerry Mulstein is because they dealt with parallels. But the problem is it valid to take a parallel from 600 AD, another parallel from 1800 BC in a country 2,500 miles away from Egypt, and then another source of 600 BC? And if they all say the same thing, or if you can manipulate them through translation, etc., does that establish a legitimate parallel? Intertextuality is the response that best refutes the parallelomania which this issue is going to deal with on the Book of Abraham as an ancient text, because they wish to show that it is an ancient text. I'm going to be very interested. I think it's going to be a very pleasant jaunt through the forest of apologetics to see what they've come up with now. And I will critique this. I will use critical and careful investigation. I will do some deep dives in much of this, I am more than sure, because I can state right up front, it's going to be wonderful to see as of 2023 how much updating they bring into this based on what has happened for the last 25 to 30 years. I'll be curious to see how their method on that works, and I will be paying attention to that certainly. And of course, they are saying we're going to quote ourselves because, of course, no Egyptologists out there agree with the LDS interpretation of the Book of Abraham Egyptian materials in relation to actual Egyptology. Now, this is an interesting situation because the apologists do sensational work Egyptologically, and they are published in Egyptological journals when they don't talk about the Book of Abraham. And John Gee has published quite a lot, and so has Kerry Mulstein. And now Stephen Smoot is joining, and I'm sure John S. Thompson, although he has come up through the church education system, so I suspect he's going to be a lesser light. And Stephen Smoot is still acquiring his PhD, so he's kind of the new kid on the block. So again, John Gee and Kerry Mulstein are the two. I believe Michael Dennis Rhodes has basically retired and dropped out of the controversy. He's actually enjoying writing commentaries on the New Testament. I've seen him with another gentleman do a commentary on 1 Corinthians that looks real promising and interesting. So basically, we're stuck with Gee and Mulstein, and for better or for worse, my impression based on all of the reading I've done on Gee and Rittner and Mulstein, etc., is none of John Gee's arguments throughout his entire 40-year career have held the day. None of it. And I feel sorry for him in a way. That's got to be depressing. The only people that seem convinced are those who are born in Mormonism, raised in Mormonism, go to BYU, etc. And no Egyptologist accepts anything he's ever written. It is quite frankly the same with Kerry Mulstein. What they've come to now, it seems to me like the apologetic effort is to redefine words. translation. They love to redefine that word. We have some excellent examples of why their methodology is entirely ridiculous on that score. I will be covering that without question. And they like to redefine words such as inspiration and the relationship of the papyri with the text is not difficult for anyone except the Mormon apologists. Now, I find this quite remarkable. This is fascinating. They want to make this issue so complicated that it justifies them being employed by the church, for one thing. And they also want it to be so complex that you yourself can't figure it out. And so you need to turn to them. It's like Dallin Oaks told that group, it's been a few years back, he said, look, we need you. You don't even have to give good answers. We just need you to provide answers as the scholars, because then the rest of the membership can see, well, he's got a PhD, he studies and writes in 3 or 4 or 5 different languages, he's very intelligent. I look at his article and it's 39 pages with 122 footnotes. This is a really serious looking piece of scholarship. This guy is way smarter than I am. So if he has it figured out, even though they don't claim to have all the answers. But if he has enough intelligence to show that he can have faith, even in the midst of this terrible controversy, then I can have faith, and they are none the wiser. This is kind of a new methodology, sort of a conspiracy between the church leadership and their scholars. So the scholars, and we do have quotes from Kerry Mulstein that I'll show you, video clips, in another issue of this particular news series, where Kerry Mulstein presents his methodology, and all his method does is it leads him to confirmation bias. It does not lead him to the truth of the actual history. And that means history, whether the 19th century history or the ancient history, it's irrelevant. So I am looking forward to sharing and updating absolutely everything, because this is what the apologists and scholars have decided they need to do with this new emphasis on revelation. They're going to gently roll it out that they're going to go with the Kabbalist theory. Why is that? Because all of their other 8 or 9 theories that they have been trying to convince people are true for the last 150 years has completely belly flopped. They're all illegitimate and no good. They're stuck in a corner. They are in a corner. They are coming out. They're beginning to prime us to begin to quit talking about translation altogether, and let's start talking revelation inspiration. It's clever, but only by half, because I'm going to give the game away, and I will share my methodology with you right here up front. They have to ignore what Joseph Smith himself said in order to save him from himself. Joseph Smith didn't think back then that anybody would ever figure out the Egyptian language. He didn't think that things would keep moving on in knowledge, and therefore he just made stuff up using sources that were available to him. And we have a lot broader range of sources that the apologists have been truly ignoring. And we have the actual evidence from Mormon scholars themselves of the sources Joseph Smith did utilize. And I don't mean just Josephus or the book of Jasher either. This is a remarkable new development that's happening. And then we have the issue of how many of us apologists and scholars have left because of the evidence. The evidence does not point to authenticity. And now scholars of the incredible caliber of Brian Hauglid, one of the editors of the Joseph Smith Papers, Volume 4, on the Book of Abraham, and Jensen. Both of those have gone away from the John G. Kerry Mulstein paradigm simply because the evidence does not support them. And I'm going to do deep dives into that, and I'm going to share with you step by step how we can figure all this out. I don't think they're going to be able to save the Book of Abraham, but I'm looking very much forward to this interesting new challenge. They're throwing down a new gauntlet, and this one's big. Obviously, they've been at work behind the scenes for several years producing this new BYU Studies Quarterly. It's a big quarterly, and they're talking on every aspect of the Book of Abraham in this thing. All I've had time to do is just decently skim and read the introduction. And so that's my introduction to my BYP responds to the new Book of Abraham Apologetics. I accept the challenge. I'm going to be very interested in seeing what we can discover and who comes out on top at the end. Because in this particular subject, simply because of the way Joseph Smith set this up, it's not because this is the way I want it, or the way Stephen Smoot wants it, or Daniel C. Peterson, or John Gee, or any of those. It's the way Joseph Smith set it up. There must be a winner, and there must be a loser. So we shall see. I'm going to accept the challenge, and I'm going to produce as much good quality, solid information, as well as several deep dives step by step to show you why I don't think the apologists are going to make it. So thanks for watching my Backyard Professor videos. Please subscribe. Don't forget to visit my podcast channel, thebackyardprofessor.org. If you would be so kind, hit the donate button, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification button, because I have a boatload of materials that are going to be coming out on all types of topics now. I'm still doing Charlie Harrell's with his book, This Is My Doctrine. And I'm going to set up a series of videos with Dan Vogel on the priesthood. We are now starting this new one with Mormonish, Rebecca Biblioteca, and Landon on the gospel topics essays. And I am taking on this Book of Abraham by myself to give us the fullest, the most complete, the most honest, and what I'm hoping is the best methodological reasons and ways to sift through the evidence, because I know from personal experience that well over half of the apologetic effort is to simply confuse us. And I'm going to cut through that confusion, and I'm going to give you step-by-step answers. So thanks for watching the Backyard Professor video. I will see you guys soon.